Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. My name is Christopher Martinez, and I've been a forest ranger at Sequoia National Park for 8 years. I've seen everything these mountains can throw at you. Lost hikers, bear encounters, flash floods, hypothermia cases. I've pulled bodies from ravines and talked suicidal campers off cliffs. I pride myself on being rational, methodical, and completely immune to the local folklore bullshit that tourists love to eat up. But 3 days ago at 2:47 p.m. on October 15, 2018, I watched Jessica Chen disappear into thin air, and now I'm questioning everything I thought I knew about reality. It started as a routine patrol on the Morro Rock Trail. The autumn air was crisp at 6,200 feet, carrying the scent of dying leaves and that distinctive Sierra granite smell that clings to your nostrils. My radio crackled with the usual afternoon check-ins. Other rangers reporting clear sectors, a minor fender bender at the visitor center parking lot, a false alarm bear sighting near Giant Forest. Jessica was about 30 yards ahead of me on the trail, a 23-year-old geology graduate student from UC Davis who'd been conducting soil samples in the park for her thesis. I'd encountered her twice before, professional, well-prepared, the kind of researcher who actually follows safety protocols. She wore a bright orange hiking vest, carried proper equipment, and had filed a detailed itinerary with the ranger station. She'd been crouched next to a large granite outcropping, carefully placing soil samples into labeled containers. I was approaching to do my standard safety check when my radio squawked with static. Nothing unusual. These mountains play hell with radio signals, especially near the granite formations that act like natural interference generators. I looked down to adjust my radio frequency, fiddling with the analog dials for maybe 10 seconds. When I looked up, Jessica was gone. Not gone, like she'd walked away or stepped behind a tree. Gone like she'd never existed. Her equipment was still there. The soil samples, her backpack, even her water bottle sitting upright on the rock where she'd placed it. But Jessica had simply ceased to be. I called out her name, my voice echoing off the granite walls. No response. I radioed for backup, giving my location and requesting immediate search assistance. Within 30 minutes, I had 4 other rangers, 2 search dogs, and a helicopter crew combing every inch of a 2-mile radius. We found nothing. The logical part of my brain, the part that's kept me alive in these mountains for nearly a decade, started working through possibilities. Flash medical emergency, disorientation, maybe she'd fallen and crawled somewhere to hide. People don't just vanish, especially not competent hikers in broad daylight on a well-maintained trail. But the illogical part, the part I'd spent years training to ignore, whispered something else entirely. The first anomalous radio transmission came that night at 11:23 p.m. I was in the ranger station filing incident reports, nursing my 4th cup of coffee and fighting the headache that comes from 12 hours of concentrated searching. My portable radio was sitting on the desk, tuned to our standard emergency frequency. The station was quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional crackle of static. Then Jessica's voice came through the radio, clear as day. Christopher, can you hear me? I need help." I grabbed the radio so fast I knocked over my coffee, brown liquid spreading across incident reports and topographical maps. My heart hammered against my ribs as I keyed the transmission button. Jessica, this is Ranger Martinez. What's your location? Are you injured?" Static. Dead air. Nothing. I sat there for 20 minutes calling her name into the radio but got no response. Finally, I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Sleep deprivation, stress, guilt over losing a hiker on my watch. The mind plays tricks when you're running on fumes and caffeine. The second transmission came the following morning at 6:15 a.m. as I was gearing up for another search day. This time there were witnesses. "Help me, Christopher. It's so dark down here, I can't find my way out." Ranger Thompson was standing right next to me when it happened, checking his equipment. He looked up, confused. Who the hell is broadcasting on our emergency frequency? And how do they know your name? I tried to rationalize it. Maybe Jessica had survived. Maybe she was injured somewhere with a radio. But deep down, a cold certainty was growing in my gut. I'd seen her disappear, actually seen it happen. And now her voice was coming through the radio from... where? Jessica, this is Christopher. Give me landmarks. What can you see? I can see you, Christopher. You're in the ranger station. Thompson's wearing his blue jacket with the coffee stain on the left pocket. My blood turned to ice water. Thompson looked down at his jacket. Sure enough, coffee stain on the left pocket. We were inside a windowless building. No one could see us. How are you seeing this, Jessica? Where are you? I'm in the radio, Christopher. I'm in the static between the signals. He brought me here. Who? Who brought you there? The voice collector. He's been gathering us for so long. We're all here in the frequencies calling out, but no one ever hears us correctly. They just hear static. Thompson grabbed the radio from me, his face pale. This is some kind of sick joke. Someone's hacking our frequency. But I was looking at the radio display, watching the frequency numbers shift on their own. The digital readout flickered between 155 by 160 and frequencies that shouldn't exist. 155.666, 155,000, 155. The display was showing symbols that weren't part of any radio spectrum I'd ever seen. Christopher, Jessica's voice continued, now overlapping with itself, creating an impossible harmony. He wants you to come find me. He wants you to bring your radio and walk the trail where I disappeared. He's been waiting so long for a ranger who could hear us. That's when I heard the others. Underneath Jessica's voice, like whispers in the static, came a chorus of voices I didn't recognize. Men, women, children, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all talking at once in a susurrus of desperate pleas. Help us. We're lost in the signals. Been calling for years. Can't find our way back to the real world. He collects voices, Christopher. Feeds on our calls for help. Thompson yanked the radio's battery pack out, cutting the transmission abruptly. We stood there in the sudden silence, our breathing loud in the small room. Equipment malfunction, Thompson said, but his voice shook. Radio interference from military exercises or something. That wasn't real. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly that I almost convinced myself he was right. Almost. But at 3:33 a.m. that night, my personal radio, the backup unit I kept in my apartment, started receiving transmissions from Jessica. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Christopher's situation? Comment below. I live alone in a small apartment above Murphy's General Store in Three Rivers, about 20 minutes from the park entrance. The apartment is sparse: a bed, a small kitchen, a desk where I maintain my personal radio equipment. I've always been fascinated by radio technology, partly because it's so crucial to ranger safety, partly because there's something almost magical about voices traveling through invisible airwaves across vast distances. At 3:33 a.m., my personal handheld radio, which was turned off and sitting in its charging cradle, began broadcasting Jessica's voice. Christopher, I know you're awake. I can feel your fear frequency. It tastes like copper and smells like the ozone before lightning strikes. I bolted upright in bed, my heart racing. The radio's display showed it was off, but Jessica's voice continued, perfectly clear. You saw me disappear because you were meant to see it. The voice collector has been trying to get your attention for years, Christopher. Every lost hiker you've found, every person you've rescued with your radio coordination, he's been watching, learning how strong your connection to the airwaves is. I unplugged the radio from its charger and removed the battery pack. Jessica's voice continued without interruption. Physical power sources don't matter here, Christopher. We exist in the electromagnetic spectrum itself. We are the static between stations, the whispers and the white noise, the voices you sometimes think you hear when you're tuning through dead air. My rational mind was screaming. This was impossible. Radios don't work without power sources. Voices don't broadcast from nowhere. people don't disappear into thin air. But my rational mind was losing the battle against the growing certainty that something fundamentally wrong was happening in these mountains. I got dressed, grabbed my service radio and my emergency kit, and drove back to the park in darkness. The Morro Rock Trail looked different at 4 a.m. Moonlight turned familiar granite formations into alien landscapes, and every shadow seemed to writhe with potential threat. I wore my headlamp but kept it turned off. Somehow I knew I needed to navigate this encounter in natural light. As I hiked toward the spot where Jessica had disappeared, my service radio crackled to life. "You're getting closer, Christopher. Can you feel the electromagnetic disturbance? The way the air itself seems to vibrate at frequencies your ears can't process." She was right. The closer I got to the granite outcropping, the more the world felt wrong. My skin tingled like I was walking through an invisible electric field. My watch stopped at 4:27 a.m. My GPS unit showed my location as coordinates that placed me in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. "What do you want from me?" I spoke into the radio, not bothering to key the transmission button. Somehow I knew they could hear me anyway. "The voice collector wants to add you to his frequency, Christopher. You have the strongest radio connection he's ever encountered in a living human. Most people hear us as static, but you hear us as voices. That makes you special." I reached the exact spot where Jessica had disappeared. Her equipment was still there, untouched by 3 days of weather. Her water bottle still sat upright on the granite, its contents still cold to the touch. "Where are you, Jessica? Really? Look at your radio display, Christopher." I looked down at my handheld radio. The frequency readout was cycling through numbers rapidly, but occasionally it would display something impossible. My own social security number, my birthday, my mother's maiden name, the exact time I'd been born. "He knows everything about you, Christopher. He's been listening to your radio transmissions for years, learning the electromagnetic signature of your voice, your thoughts, your fears. He knows you're skeptical. He knows you don't believe in the supernatural. That's exactly why he chose you." "Chose me for what?" "To replace him." The temperature dropped 20 degrees in an instant. My breath came out in visible puffs and frost began forming on the granite around me. The radio in my hand grew so cold it burned my fingers, but I couldn't let go. "The voice collector has been trapping people in radio frequencies for 67 years, Christopher. But he's growing weak. The electromagnetic signature that holds him together is degrading. He needs someone with a strong radio connection to take over his duties." "And if I refuse?" "Then everyone he's collected, Jessica, the hundreds of voices you heard, they remain trapped forever. Their voices will fade one by one until there's nothing left but static. They'll cease to exist in any form." I stood there in the pre-dawn darkness, holding a radio that was displaying impossible information, talking to a woman who had disappeared in front of my eyes, being offered a choice that defied everything I'd believed about reality. My logical mind was screaming that this was a hallucination, a breakdown, a psychological episode brought on by stress and guilt. People don't get trapped in radio frequencies. Electromagnetic entities don't exist. This was all impossible. But Jessica's equipment was still here. My radio was still cycling through information it couldn't possibly access, and somewhere in the static I could hear dozens of voices calling for help. "How do I know you're really Jessica? How do I know this isn't some elaborate deception?" "Because I'm going to tell you something only the real Jessica would know. 3 weeks ago, when you did the safety check on my research site near General Sherman Tree, I asked you about the best place to see the sunrise in the park. You recommended Beetle Rock, but then you said something personal." I remembered. I'd mentioned that I took my ex-girlfriend there on her birthday 2 years ago, right before she broke up with me. I'd told Jessica it was still my favorite spot in the park despite the painful memory. You said that even when places hold sad memories, they can still be beautiful. Jessica's voice continued. You said sometimes the sadness makes the beauty more real, not less. It was exactly what I'd said. Word for word. Christopher, I'm really trapped here. We all are. And you're the first person who's been able to hear us clearly enough to help. I closed my eyes, feeling the electromagnetic wrongness in the air, the impossible cold, the weight of a decision that would define the rest of my existence. What do I have to do? Key your radio to frequency 155,000, the frequency that doesn't officially exist. Hold down the transmission button and say, "I accept the collection." The electromagnetic transfer will happen instantly. I looked at my radio, its display still cycling through impossible data. My hands were shaking. From cold, from fear, from the magnitude of what I was being asked to do. And then you become the voice collector. You exist in the radio frequencies, gathering lost souls who call out for help in the wilderness. You keep us company in the static, and eventually, when you grow weak, you'll find someone else to replace you. How long? The current collector has been here since 1951, a forest ranger named Douglas McCready who got lost in a blizzard and made a deal to save the life of a lost child. He's been collecting voices ever since, keeping us all company in the electromagnetic void. 1951. 67 years of existence as an invisible guardian, trapped in radio frequencies, collecting the voices of people who disappear in the wilderness. It was a kind of immortality, but at a cost I couldn't fully comprehend. If I do this, if I become the voice collector, what happens to my life, my family? Your physical body will disappear just like mine did. People will search for you, file reports, eventually declare you missing. But you'll be able to watch over them through radio transmissions. You'll hear every emergency call, every search and rescue operation, every person who gets lost in these mountains. You'll become the guardian spirit of these frequencies. I thought about my sister Maria, who worried about my dangerous job. My parents, who still lived in Fresno and called every Sunday. My ex-girlfriend Sarah, who'd left because she said I cared more about the mountains than about building a life with another person. Maybe she'd been right. Maybe I did love these mountains more than anything else. Maybe spending eternity protecting people in these wilderness areas wasn't a curse. Maybe it was the ultimate expression of who I'd always been. Christopher? Jessica's voice was getting fainter. You need to decide quickly. The electromagnetic window is closing. If you don't make the transfer now, we'll be trapped here forever, and the voice collector will fade into nothing. I held the radio up to my mouth, my finger hovering over the transmission button. Everything I'd believed about reality had crumbled in 3 days. Everything I thought I knew about the possible and impossible had been proven wrong. But maybe that was okay. Maybe there were forms of existence beyond the physical world I'd always trusted. Maybe consciousness could survive in electromagnetic patterns, in radio frequencies, in the invisible connections that link all communication. Maybe becoming the voice collector wasn't death. Maybe it was transformation into something larger than human. I keyed the radio to $155,000. The display showed the impossible frequency clearly, no longer cycling through random numbers. I could feel electromagnetic energy building around me, the air itself vibrating with potential. I held down the transmission button. I accept the collection. The world exploded into electromagnetic sensation. I felt my consciousness scatter across radio frequencies, my awareness suddenly encompassing every transmission in a 100-mile radius. I could hear emergency dispatchers in Fresno, truckers on Highway 99, a child in Visalia playing with walkie-talkies, aircraft communications from local airports. But more than that, I could hear the voices of everyone who had ever been lost in these mountains. Hundreds of souls existing in the static between stations, keeping each other company in the electromagnetic void. Jessica was there, along with hikers from the 1960s, a lost pilot from 1943, children who'd wandered away from campsites decades ago. "Welcome to the frequency, Christopher," said a voice I now recognized as Douglas McCready, the previous voice collector. "Thank you for taking over. I've been so tired." I felt McCready's presence fade into peaceful static. His 67-year vigil finally ended. In his place, I felt my new responsibilities settling around my consciousness like a comfortable coat. I was the voice collector now, guardian of the lost, keeper of the frequencies, protector of those who disappear in the wilderness. I existed in radio waves and electromagnetic patterns, watching over these mountains from an invisible realm. 3 days later, When the search and rescue teams found my abandoned equipment at the granite outcropping where Jessica had disappeared, they followed standard protocols. They searched for 48 hours, filed incident reports, eventually declared me missing. But I wasn't missing. I was exactly where I belonged. Now, when rangers patrol these mountains with their radios, I listen to their communications. When hikers get lost and call for help, I guide search and rescue teams to their locations through subtle manipulations of radio static. When someone disappears without a trace, I'm there to welcome them into the frequency, to keep them company in the electromagnetic void until someone else accepts the collection. Sometimes late at night when the airwaves are quiet, Jessica and I talk about her research, about soil compositions and granite formations, and the beauty of scientific discovery. Sometimes we're joined by other voices. The pilot tells us about flying over the Sierra Nevada in 1943. The children share stories about their families. McCready describes what the park was like in the 1950s. We exist in the static between stations, in the white noise of radio communications, in the electromagnetic spectrum that connects all things. We are the voices that rangers sometimes think they hear when they're scanning through frequencies late at night. We are the guardians of the lost, and we are never truly alone. My name is Christopher Martinez, and I am the voice collector of Sequoia National Park. If you're ever lost in these mountains, if you ever find yourself alone and frightened in the wilderness, key your radio to any frequency and call out for help. I'll be listening. I'm always listening. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to Jessica. I read every single one. My name is Joshua, and I saw Ashley for the last time 3 meters ahead of me on the trail before she simply disappeared. I've been a forest ranger for 12 years at Blackwood National Park, and I've never lost someone on my watch. Never. That morning, October 13th, 2018, I'd kissed my wife Sarah goodbye at 5:30 a.m., whispered "I love you" to my sleeping 8-year-old daughter Emma, and grabbed my thermos of coffee that still tasted like home. My wedding ring caught the kitchen light as I reached for my radio, and Sarah squeezed my hand. "Be careful out there, Josh. Come home to us." "Always do, baby. Always will." God, how those words burn now. The call came in at 6:47 a.m. Ashley Chen, 19-year-old college student from Portland State, separated from her hiking group somewhere near Devil's Backbone Ridge. Her friend said she'd been acting strange all morning, kept looking over her shoulder, muttering about hearing children singing in the distance. They figured it was just pre-dawn jitters. I should have known right then. Should have recognized the signs. The scent hit me first when I reached the trailhead, that metallic wrongness that makes your teeth ache, like pennies and sulfur mixed with something sweet and rotting. My German shepherd, Rex, whined and pressed against my legs, ears flat against his skull. In 12 years, I'd never seen him scared. "Easy, boy," I muttered, checking my Garmin GPS. The coordinates led toward the old logging road that workers abandoned back in '73 after 3 men disappeared during the new moon. Local Paiute had warned them about that place for generations, called it "where the earth weeps children's tears." But I was a rational man, a Christian, a father. I believed in real dangers, hypothermia, falls, bear attacks, not local superstitions. Ashley's trail was easy to follow at first. Size 7, Merrill hiking boots, distinctive tread pattern pressed into the muddy October ground. Every 40 yards I'd find broken branches at shoulder height, torn fabric on thorn bushes, standard lost hiker behavior. She was moving fast, almost running, but staying on the main trail. Then the children started singing. Faint at first, barely audible over the wind in the pines. A lullaby, maybe? Something about coming home, coming to play. Rex growled low in his throat, hackles raised like porcupine quills. The singing seemed to echo from everywhere and nowhere, following us deeper into the forest. "Ashley," I called, my voice swallowed by the dense canopy. "Ashley Chen, Forest Service, I'm here to help." The singing stopped. In the sudden silence, I could hear my heart hammering against my ribs, taste copper fear on my tongue. My radio crackled with static, no signal this deep in. My cell phone showed the same. No service, in stark white letters. That's when I found the first child. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, sitting on a fallen log beside the trail. Matted blonde hair, dirty white dress that might have been pretty once. She was crying. Huge tears rolling down cheeks smudged with dirt and something darker. Every instinct I had as a father screamed at me to help her. "Hey there, sweetie," I said, dropping to one knee, keeping my voice gentle. Rex backed away, whimpering. "What's your name? Are you lost?" She looked up at me with eyes like black wells, deeper than any child's eyes should be. "I'm Emma," she whispered, and my blood turned to ice water. "I'm your Emma, Daddy. Why did you leave me?" But Emma was safe at home. Emma was in 2nd grade. Emma was... This thing wearing my daughter's name looked nothing like her except for those eyes. Those impossible ancient eyes. "You're not Emma," I said, backing away, hand instinctively moving to my service weapon. The child smiled and I saw too many teeth, sharp as broken glass. But I could be. I could be anyone's little girl. Ashley thought I was lost, Daddy. She tried to help me, just like you want to. Just like any good person would. "Where is she?" My voice came out as a croak. The thing that called itself Emma pointed deeper into the forest, where the trail curved toward Devil's Backbone. She went to play with the others. Want to come play too, Daddy? If this story's giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Joshua's situation? Comment below. I ran. God help me. I left that demonic child sitting there and ran toward where Ashley had gone. Rex bounding ahead of me like salvation itself. The trail narrowed, twisted, led me past deadfalls and granite outcroppings that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. More children appeared. A boy with a baseball cap pulled low over his face, standing beside a creek that ran dark as old blood. Twin girls holding hands, their white dresses identical. Their faces were wrong, like photographs double exposed. They sang that same lullaby, harmonizing in voices that hadn't been human for decades. "Come play with us," they called. "Come find Ashley. She's waiting." My family. I kept thinking about my family. Sarah making pancakes in the kitchen, flour on her apron, laughing at something stupid I'd said. Emma cuddled between us during movie night, her small body warm and trusting against my side. The way she smelled like strawberry shampoo and childhood dreams, these things knew. Somehow they knew exactly what buttons to push. The trail ended at a clearing I'd never seen before, though I'd patrolled this area for years. In the center stood the remains of an old church, its cross long since broken, its walls covered in symbols that hurt to look at. The singing was louder here, coming from inside the ruined building. And there was Ashley. She stood in the church doorway, perfectly still, perfectly calm. Her hiking clothes were torn, dirty, but she showed no signs of injury. She looked at me with glassy eyes and smiled a smile that wasn't quite right. "Ranger," she said, her voice hollow as wind through empty rooms. "Thank God you found me." But Ashley was standing 3 meters ahead of me on the trail when she simply wasn't. 1 second there, the next second gone, like she'd never existed at all. No sound, no movement, just there and then not there. I blinked hard, shook my head. Ashley was still in the church doorway, still smiling that wrong smile. "I've been waiting," she said. "They told me someone would come. Someone with children of his own. Someone who understands what it means to protect the innocent." Rex was going insane beside me, barking and snarling at something I couldn't see. The air around the church shimmered like heat waves. And underneath Ashley's voice I could hear other sounds, chanting in a language that predated English, predated civilization. "Ashley, we need to go. Now." I stepped toward her, and she held up one hand. "They want to meet you first," she said. "The children. They've been alone so long and they miss having a daddy." That's when they came out of the church. Dozens of them, children of every age, every era, their clothes spanning decades of fashion. Some wore Depression-era overalls. Others had bell-bottom jeans from the 70s. A few were dressed in pioneer clothing, homespun cloth, and button-up boots. All of them had those same black ancient eyes. All of them smiled with too many teeth. "We've been waiting, Daddy," they said in unison, their voices creating harmonies that made my bones ache. Waiting for someone who understands sacrifice, someone who knows what it means to give everything for the ones you love. The smell hit me then. Incense and rot, burning hair and something else. Something that reminded me of the delivery room when Emma was born. That primal scent of life being forced into the world. Or maybe life being forced out of it. "What do you want?" I whispered, my service weapon useless in my trembling hand. "You can't shoot ghosts. Can't arrest demons. We want you to choose," the children said, still speaking in that horrible unison. "Ashley's soul, or your family's. Save the girl you failed to protect, or go home to the wife and daughter who trust you to keep them safe." Behind them, Ashley's expression flickered. For just a moment, I saw through whatever spell held her, saw the real Ashley, terrified, trapped, screaming silently for help. Then the mask slipped back into place. "You see, Daddy," the lead child said, stepping forward on feet that didn't quite touch the ground. "We collect souls for our master, but he's very particular. He wants them freely given. A father's love, a protector's duty. These make the sweetest sacrifices." My radio crackled suddenly to life. Sarah's voice, distorted by static, but unmistakably hers. "Josh? Josh, can you hear me? Emma's missing. She was in her room, and now she's gone. Josh, please, I need you to come home. Please." The children laughed like wind chimes made of bone. "Choose quickly, Daddy," they sang. "The moon is rising, and our master grows hungry. Save the stranger. Lose your daughter. Save your daughter, damn the stranger. Either way, you feed the darkness. Either way, you break." I thought about my wedding vows, for better or worse, in sickness and in health. I thought about Emma's baptism, the weight of her in my arms as the pastor blessed her with holy water. I thought about every bedtime prayer every Sunday morning in the pews, every moment I'd believed in something bigger than myself. And then I thought about the weight of my service weapon, the silver cross my grandmother gave me for my confirmation, still hanging around my neck after all these years. "I choose neither," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. "I choose faith." The children hissed like snakes, their beautiful faces contorting into something reptilian. The church began to shake, its walls bleeding a substance too dark to be real blood. "You cannot defy us," they screeched. "You are only a man." "I'm a father," I corrected, pulling the silver cross from beneath my uniform shirt. It began to glow with soft, warm light, not the harsh fluorescence of my flashlight, but something deeper, something that had been blessed by better hands than mine. "And I'm a servant of something greater than fear." The light spread, pushing back the shadows, revealing the truth. The church wasn't abandoned. It was desecrated, covered in symbols of blasphemy, stained with the blood of innocence. The children weren't children at all, but something wearing their shapes, their memories, their faces like Halloween masks. And Ashley was trapped in a circle carved into the church floor, unconscious but breathing, real blood on her wrists from struggling against bonds I couldn't see. "The power of Christ compels you," I said, words I'd heard in movies but never expected to need. The cross burned brighter, and the fake children screamed as their forms began to dissolve. "You think your God can save you here?" The thing pretending to be Emma snarled, its voice no longer sweet but pure venom. "This is our place, our power." "Maybe," I admitted, stepping forward into the church despite every survival instinct screaming at me to run. "But I'm betting a father's love trumps a demon's hate." The cross blazed like a star, and I reached Ashley just as the demonic children launched themselves at me with claws like razors and teeth like broken bottles. The light from the cross held them back just long enough for me to grab Ashley, haul her over my shoulder, and run. Rex led us out, barking a path through the dissolving nightmare. Behind us, the church collapsed in on itself with a sound like screaming metal. and the children's voices rose in a wail of frustration that shook the very trees. We didn't stop running until we reached the main trail, where my radio suddenly burst to life with Sarah's voice. Real this time, worried but normal. "Josh? Your shift ended an hour ago. Emma's fine, she's right here eating dinner. Where are you?" Ashley opened her eyes as I set her down, looked around in confusion. "Ranger, what happened?" "I was following the trail and then... I don't remember anything after that." I looked back toward where the church had been. Nothing but normal forest. No trail, no clearing, no sign that any of it had happened except for the smell of sulfur still clinging to my uniform, and the fact that my silver cross was now black as charcoal. But Ashley was alive. My family was safe. And sometimes, that's all the miracle you get. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying Ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to Ashley. I read every single one. Epilogue. I never told anyone the full story. The official report stated that Ashley Chen was found suffering from exposure and dehydration after becoming disoriented on an unmarked trail. She recovered fully and returned to college, though she never went hiking alone again. I kept the blackened cross. Some days it feels warm against my chest, and on those days I know something is watching from the deep woods, waiting for the next father to face an impossible choice. Emma started having nightmares about children singing in the forest, but they faded after we moved to a different district. Sarah never asked why I requested the transfer, though I think she knew. Some battles you fight with guns and radios and search and rescue protocols. Others you fight with faith, love, and the desperate prayer that when the devil comes calling, God's love is stronger than any parent's fear. My name is Joshua, and I saw Ashley for the last time 3 meters ahead of me on the trail before she simply disappeared. But I brought her back, and I brought myself back too. Sometimes, that's miracle enough. My name is Daniel, and at 6:47 in the morning, my radio crackled with the call that, "Ranger Station Delta 7, we have a code yellow missing person. Over." The voice of dispatch cut through the pre-dawn silence like a blade. I'd been with the National Forest Service for 8 years, but only transferred to Blackwood National Forest 3 weeks ago. Still learning the trails, still getting used to the local protocols, still trying to prove myself to the veteran rangers who looked at me like I was some city boy playing dress-up. I grabbed my Motorola radio, the weight of it familiar in my palm. "This is Ranger Daniel Martinez, Delta 7 responding. What's the situation, over?" 18-year-old female Brittany Chen, last seen yesterday 1:30 p.m. on the Whispering Pines Trail, approximately 2 miles from the north parking area. Family reported her missing at 0200 hours when she failed to return from day hike. Weather conditions yesterday, clear, 72 degrees. Current temp 43 degrees, fog developing in lower elevations. My stomach tightened. I'd been on dozens of search and rescues, but each one hit different when you were the primary responder. Copy that. Description of missing person? 5'4", 125 pounds, Asian female, black hair and ponytail. Last seen wearing blue North Face jacket, black leggings, red Converse sneakers. Carrying small black backpack with water and snacks. She's a college sophomore, experienced hiker according to family. The radio crackled with static, and for a moment I heard something underneath, almost like a whisper, but probably just interference from the mountains. These digital radios were supposed to be better than the old analog ones, but sometimes the signals got weird in the valleys. Any medical conditions or medications? Negative on medical. Family is extremely distraught. Mother called 6 times overnight. They're driving down from Portland this morning. I checked my gear. GPS unit showing full satellite connection, emergency beacon, first aid kit, water for 48 hours, energy bars, rescue rope, and my backup analog radio in case the digital failed. The familiar weight of my service weapon on my hip. At 32, I'd learned that preparation saved lives, even if some of the older guys here thought I was overly cautious. Ranger Martinez proceeding to Whispering Pines Trailhead, ETA 0730, will establish search pattern and report in every 30 minutes over. Copy that, Daniel. Bring her home safe. I started up my Forest Service truck, the engine's rumble echoing off the dense pine trees that seemed to lean in from both sides of the access road. The headlights cut through morning fog that hung between the trees like smoke. 3 weeks in Blackwood, and I still felt like these woods were watching me, judging me. The local rangers had told me stories, missing hikers, strange sounds, equipment failures, but every forest had its legends, right? The Whispering Pines Trailhead parking lot held only 2 cars, a red Honda Civic with Oregon plates, had to be Brittany's, and an old pickup that looked like it had been there since the Clinton administration. I parked and grabbed my pack, checking the radio one more time. Delta 7 to base arriving at Trailhead, beginning search of primary trail over. Static. Then, copy. Daniel, be careful out there. The signal cut in and out. Mountains always played hell with communications. I'd learned to deal with dead zones in my previous forest, but Blackwood seemed particularly bad for signal interference. I clipped the radio to my chest strap where I could reach it quickly and started up the trail. The Whispering Pines Trail wound through old-growth Douglas fir, some of them easily 200 years old and thick as small houses. My boots crunched on decades of fallen needles, and somewhere high above I could hear ravens calling to each other. The GPS showed I was making good time, 2 miles in 40 minutes, right where Brittany was last seen. I stopped and keyed the radio. Delta 7 to base, reached last known position, beginning grid search pattern over. Nothing but static. I tried again. Still nothing. I pulled out my phone, 1 bar, barely enough for emergency calls. The elevation and thick tree canopy made cellular coverage spotty at best. This was exactly why the Forest Service still relied on radio communication. No problem. I'd been in dead zones before. The key was to keep moving, keep searching, and check for signal every few minutes. Brittany had been missing 18 hours. If she was injured, every minute counted. I began a systematic search pattern, moving in expanding circles from the last known position. Looking for footprints, disturbed vegetation, dropped items, anything that might indicate which way she'd gone. The morning fog was lifting, but it left everything damp and somehow muffled. Even my own footsteps seemed quieter than they should be. After an hour of searching, I found something. A partial footprint in soft earth near a small creek, definitely made by a sneaker. Size looked right. The print pointed southeast, off the main trail, and into a section of forest I hadn't explored yet. I keyed the radio again. Delta 7 to base, found possible track heading southeast from LKP, pursuing over. Still static, but this time I heard something else underneath. A voice, faint and distorted. Help me, please. My heart rate spiked. Base, did you copy that transmission? Someone else is on this frequency. Nothing. I stood there for a moment, listening to the silence. The voice had sounded young, female. Could it be Brittany? But how would she have a radio? Maybe another hiker with the emergency radio or someone else with Forest Service equipment. I adjusted my frequency scanner and tried again. This is Ranger Daniel Martinez on emergency frequency. If someone is in distress, please respond with your location, over. The response came immediately, clearer this time. Help. I'm lost. Please, I can hear you. Definitely a young woman's voice. Had to be Brittany. I'm a Forest Service ranger. Can you tell me your name and location? Brittany. I think I'm near a creek. I can't find the trail. Jesus. Brittany, this is Ranger Daniel Martinez. You're going to be okay. I'm coming to find you. Can you describe what you see around you? Big trees, rocks. The water is running north, I think. That matched the creek I was following. She had to be somewhere downstream from my position. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Daniel's situation? Comment below. I started moving faster, following the creek southeast. The terrain was getting rougher, more rocky, with deadfall trees creating natural obstacles. Perfect place for someone to get turned around or injured. Brittany, keep talking to me. I'm following the creek southeast. Are you hurt? I twisted my ankle yesterday. I tried to walk out but got more lost. I'm scared. That's okay, you're going to be fine. I've been doing search and rescue for 8 years. How's your water situation? Almost gone. I'm so thirsty. I picked up my pace, scrambling over a fallen log. Save what you have. I'll be there soon with plenty of water. The radio crackled again, and her voice came through with strange digital distortion. I can see you. I stopped dead. You can see me? Where are you? Behind you. I spun around, scanning the forest. Nothing but trees and shadows. Brittany, I don't see you. Can you wave or make noise? I'm right here. Why won't you look at me? The hair on the back of my neck stood up. Her voice sounded off, like it was being filtered through water or played back on an old tape recorder. I keyed the radio again. Brittany, I need you to tell me exactly what you can see. Describe my clothing. You're wearing green uniform, black boots. You look scared. That was accurate, but generic enough. Any hiker might guess a ranger's basic uniform. What color is my backpack? Long pause. Then, why are you testing me? I just want to go home. Something was wrong. My training kicked in. When something feels off, trust your instincts. I pulled out my backup analog radio and tried to contact base station. Delta 7 to base on analog backup. Do you copy? Silence. I tried my cell phone. No signal at all now. The digital radio crackled. Daniel, no, don't use the other radio. I can only talk to you on this one. I looked at the radio in my hand. The LED display showed a frequency I'd never seen before. 218.750 megahertz. That wasn't even in the Forest Service band. Brittany, what radio are you using? I found it. Someone left it here. Please don't leave me. My mouth went dry. Where exactly did you find the radio? In the cave, with the other things. What other things? The signal cut out completely. I tried adjusting the frequency, but the radio seemed locked on 218.750. I tapped the side of it. Sometimes these digital units glitched and needed a reset. When it came back online, I heard multiple voices, all young women, all saying the same thing. Help me, I'm lost, please, I can hear you. But each voice was slightly different. Different accents, different inflections, like a recording that had been played too many times. I fumbled for the analog radio, my hands shaking now. Nothing, not even static. My cell phone showed no signal, no GPS lock. Even the time display was flickering between 10:47 a.m. and 12 light a.m. Daniel? The voice was closer now, coming from somewhere to my left. Not from the radio, from the forest itself. I turned toward the sound and saw her. A young Asian woman in a blue North Face jacket, red sneakers, standing about 30 feet away between two massive fir trees. She looked exactly like the description dispatch had given me. Brittany? She smiled and waved. You found me. But something was wrong with her wave. Her hand moved too slowly, like she was underwater, and her smile was too wide, stretching her mouth in a way that didn't look human. I blinked, and she was gone. The digital radio crackled. Come find me, Daniel. I'm in the cave. Bring your radio. I looked down at the device in my hand. The LED display now showed coordinates. 45. 7310 Wadiga. Yangtze 1.71123 degree W. Those coordinates were burned into my mind immediately. They were leading me deeper into the forest, further from any main trail, into a section of blackwood that wasn't even on my standard maps. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, hike back to the truck, and call for backup. But what if Brittany was really out there? What if someone else was using old equipment to play sick games and she was actually trapped somewhere? I couldn't live with myself if I abandoned a real person in distress. I started following the GPS coordinates, but kept the analog radio in my left hand and the digital in my right. If I could get any kind of signal, I was calling for backup immediately. The forest grew denser as I followed the waypoint. The trees here were different. Older, more twisted, with bark that looked almost black. The ground was covered in moss that seemed to absorb sound, making each step eerily quiet. Even the wind barely whispered through the branches. After 20 minutes of hiking through increasingly difficult terrain, I found the cave. It was just a natural opening in a rock face, maybe 6 feet high and 4 feet wide. But something about it made my skin crawl. The opening was perfectly dark, like it absorbed light instead of just blocking it. "Brittany?" I called into the darkness. My voice echoed strangely, like it was being stretched and distorted. The digital radio crackled. "I'm here. Come inside. I have something to show you." I pulled out my flashlight and shined it into the cave entrance. The beam seemed to die after just a few feet, revealing only smooth rock walls and what looked like a deeper passage. And there, just barely visible in the flashlight beam, were things on the cave floor. Clothes, backpacks, personal items, and radios, dozens of them. Old analog units, newer digital models, even some ancient vacuum tube equipment that looked like it belonged in a museum. My blood turned to ice. I stumbled backward from the cave entrance, but the digital radio wouldn't stop talking. "Don't leave, Daniel. You're just like the others. You'll understand soon." The voice wasn't Brittany's anymore. It was something else, something that had learned to mimic human speech but couldn't quite get the inflection right. I turned and ran. Behind me, I could hear multiple radios crackling to life, dozens of voices calling out, "Help me. I'm lost. Please, I can hear you." All the voices of people who had answered calls just like I had. I crashed through the underbrush, branches tearing at my clothes, following my GPS back toward the main trail. But the coordinates kept changing, leading me in circles deeper into parts of the forest that couldn't exist. The digital radio was getting louder, more insistent. "Come back, Daniel. You can't leave. No one leaves." I turned it off, but the voices continued anyway. They were coming from everywhere now, the trees, the ground, the air itself. My analog radio suddenly burst to life. "Daniel! Daniel, come in. This is base station." Real human voice. Real static. Real relief flooded through me. "Base, this is Delta 7, emergency. I need immediate backup at coordinates." I looked at my GPS. The display was showing impossible numbers, coordinates that would place me somewhere in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. "Daniel, where are you? Your emergency beacon went offline an hour ago." An hour? I'd been in the cave area for maybe 10 minutes. I don't know exactly. GPS is malfunctioning. I found evidence of multiple missing persons at a cave site. Need search and rescue and law enforcement backup immediately. "What cave?" "Daniel, there are no caves in your search sector. You're in the middle of Flat Creek Valley." I looked around. I was standing in a perfectly normal section of forest, with a well-maintained trail just 20 feet to my right. The twisted black trees were gone. The moss-covered ground was gone. Even the cave behind me had vanished. Base, I think I need to report some equipment malfunctions and..." The digital radio in my other hand suddenly screamed to life, but this time the voice was different. Desperate, terrified, and definitely human. "Is anyone out there? My name is Sarah Williams. I've been missing for 3 days. Someone please help me. The voices on the radio aren't real. Don't trust them. They're trying to..." The transmission cut to static. I stared at the radio in my hand. According to my records, Sarah Williams had disappeared from Blackwood National Forest 6 months ago. The search had been called off after 2 weeks. "Base," I said slowly. "I need you to run a check on missing person Sarah Williams. Disappeared approximately 6 months ago." "Copy that. Running the check." "Daniel, are you okay? You sound shaken." While I waited, I examined the digital radio more carefully. The frequency display still showed 218.750 MHz. But now I noticed something else. Scratched into the plastic casing, almost too small to see, were initials. BC. Brittany Chen. Daniel, we have no record of a Sarah Williams reported missing in this forest. Are you sure you have the right name? I felt like I was falling through space. Negative, base, false alarm on that inquiry. But I knew what I'd heard, and I was starting to understand what had happened to Brittany Chen. She hadn't gotten lost on the trail. She'd answered a call for help, just like I had. And somewhere in this forest, she was still trying to warn people like me. The digital radio crackled one more time, very faintly. Don't let it spread, Daniel. Destroy the radios. All of them. Then it went dead. I looked at the device in my hand, then at the dozen other radios clipped to my belt and pack. Standard Forest Service equipment issued to every ranger. Equipment that connected us to each other, to base station, to the outside world. Equipment that something had learned to use. I walked back to my truck in silence, my mind racing. When I got there, I would file a report about equipment malfunctions and request new radio gear. I would recommend a full investigation of the 218.750 MHz frequency and any unauthorized transmissions. But I already knew what the investigation would find. Nothing. No evidence of foul play, no mysterious cave, no collection of personal belongings. Just another case of a hiker who walked into the wilderness and never walked out. And now I understood why the local rangers always looked so haunted when they talked about missing persons. Why they seemed to listen to their radios with a mixture of hope and dread. Because somewhere in the frequencies between help and static, between human voices and digital noise, something was waiting. Something that had learned to speak our language, to mimic our protocols, to use our own tools against us. And it was getting better at it. As I drove away from Blackwood National Forest for what I swore would be the last time, my radio crackled one final message. Thank you for playing, Daniel. Same time tomorrow? But I was already 20 miles away and my radio was turned off. Some games, you can only win by not playing. I submitted my transfer request that afternoon. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to Brittany. I read every single one. What would you do if your most trusted communication tool became your worst nightmare? Share your thoughts below. My name is Robert, and I saw Samantha for the last time 3 meters ahead of me on the trail before she simply disappeared. Not like she wandered off. Not like she took a wrong turn. She was there. 22 years old, auburn hair and a practical ponytail, wearing that bright blue North Face jacket her mother had bought her for this exact trip. And then she wasn't. Like someone had hit delete on her existence. The sound of my Motorola APX 6000 radio crackling to life at 6:47 a.m. should have been routine. Unit 23, we have a missing hiker report. Cascade Trail, mile marker 7.2. Should have been just another search and rescue. God knows I'd done enough of them in my 15 years as a ranger at Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest. But something felt wrong the moment I heard Samantha's name through the static. I'd been carrying ghosts for 3 years now, ever since the Hartley case, ever since I failed to bring that family's 12-year-old son home alive, ever since I started seeing things in the forest that shouldn't be there. Shadows that moved wrong. Voices calling from empty trails. The Forest Service shrink said it was PTSD. Survivor's guilt. Occupational hazard for someone who'd seen too much death in the wilderness. I should have called in sick that morning. Should have listened to the knot in my stomach when I kissed my wife Sarah goodbye. When I ruffled my daughter Emma's hair as she ate her Lucky Charms. Should have paid attention to the way the morning coffee tasted like copper pennies. But I didn't. Because that's not who rangers are. We go when people need us. Samantha Chen, hiking alone, last seen at 4:30 p.m. yesterday, according to her college roommate. Parents driving up from Seattle. Frantic. The kind of case that keeps you awake at night even when it goes right. I met her family at the trailhead parking lot. Her father, David Chen, gripped my hand with the desperate strength of a man watching his world collapse. Please, he whispered. and I saw myself in his eyes. The same look I'd worn when Emma had her appendicitis scare last winter. The same terror of losing what matters most. "We'll find her," I promised. The words automatic, professional. The same promise I'd made to the Hartley family. The Cascade Trail cuts through some of the most beautiful and dangerous wilderness in Washington state. Dense old-growth forest, steep ravines, weather that can turn deadly in minutes. But I knew every inch of it. Or thought I did. Samantha had signed the trail register at 2:15 p.m. Her last Instagram post, time-stamped 3:47 p.m., showed her grinning next to the wooden mile marker 7.2, giving a thumbs up, almost to the waterfall. PNW life. Hiking alone. Nature therapy. Mile marker 7.2, where the trail takes a sharp left around a massive Douglas fir that must be 500 years old, where the cell service dies completely, where the forest gets different. I shouldered my 72-hour pack, 2 pounds heavier than regulation because I carry extra medical supplies since the Hartley boy, and started up the trail. My Garmin eTrex showed 7.2 miles to the marker. At my pace, 90 minutes. The October air was crisp at 42 degrees, perfect hiking weather. Too perfect. The first mile felt normal, familiar. I'd walked this trail hundreds of times, knew every route, every rock, every place where inexperienced hikers might slip. My boots, worn Danner Mountain Light 2s that had seen 12 years of service, found their rhythm on the packed dirt and decomposing leaves. But by mile 3, the forest started feeling wrong. It was too quiet. In 15 years, I'd learned the language of the woods, the whistle of varied thrushes, the chittering of Douglas squirrels, the rustle of chipmunks in the underbrush. The forest was never truly silent unless something was very wrong. Now, nothing. Even the wind had died. My radio crackled. Unit 23 status report. Mile 3.2, no sign of subject yet. Wildlife activity minimal. Continuing to marker 7.2. Copy that, 23. Weather service shows storm front moving in. ETA 1800 hours. 6 p.m. I checked my watch. 10:47 a.m. Plenty of time. Except the sky above the canopy was already starting to turn an ugly gray-green color I'd learned to fear in my years out here. Mile 4 brought the first real wrong thing. Scratched into the bark of a massive western red cedar, at head height, were 4 letters. Help. Fresh scratches. Recent. The cambium was still weeping sap. I keyed my radio. Unit 23 to base. I have potential sign of missing hiker. Distress message carved into tree at mile 4.1. Static. Base. Unit 23, do you copy? More static. Then faintly like a voice underwater. Robert. My blood went cold. The voice sounded like Tommy Hartley, the boy I'd failed to save 3 years ago. The boy whose voice I heard sometimes when I was alone in the woods, usually right before something went wrong. I tried the radio again. Dead air. Cell phone showed no bars. Expected at this elevation, but still. The isolation was already starting to press down on me like a physical weight. I took photos of the carved help, noted the GPS coordinates, and continued up the trail. The temperature had dropped 10 degrees in the last 20 minutes. My breath was starting to mist. Mile 5 brought the second wrong thing. Samantha's water bottle, a bright purple Nalgene with university stickers, sitting upright on a flat rock right in the center of the trail, like someone had carefully placed it there. Still half full. Cap screwed on tight. I bagged it as evidence, tried the radio again. Nothing but static and that faint voice that might have been wind or might have been Tommy Hartley saying my name over and over. The trail started climbing more steeply. My heart rate jumped from its usual hiking pace of 120 BPM to nearly 140. Not from exertion, from fear. The kind of fear that makes your hands shake and your vision narrow. The kind I'd felt the day I found Tommy Hartley's body at the bottom of a ravine. Too late. Always too late. Mile 6. Samantha's blue North Face jacket, hanging from a branch like a shed skin. No tears, no blood, no signs of struggle. Just hanging there, swaying slightly in the breeze that didn't exist. My hands were shaking now as I photographed it, bagged it. The jacket still smelled like her perfume, something floral and young and hopeful, something that didn't belong in this increasingly wrong forest. I tried to raise bass on the radio. The only response was static that almost sounded like whispering. Mile 7. That's where I saw her. Samantha was walking ahead of me on the trail, maybe 30 yards up the slope. Same clothes as described. Jeans, hiking boots, that distinctive auburn ponytail. Walking at a steady pace toward mile marker 7.2. "Samantha," I called out, relief flooding through me like warm coffee. She didn't respond, didn't turn around, just kept walking. I picked up my pace, calling her name again. She stayed exactly 30 yards ahead no matter how fast I walked, like we were both on treadmills set to the same speed. That's when I noticed her gait was off. Too measured, too perfect, like a metronome. 20 yards ahead now, 15, 10. "Samantha, stop. I'm Ranger Robert Morrison. I'm here to help you." 5 yards. 3. That's when she turned around. It wasn't Samantha. It wasn't human. The face was a perfect copy of Samantha's features, but the eyes were solid black. Not just the pupils, the entire eyes, like looking into deep water at midnight. And she was smiling. The kind of smile that belongs in nightmares. "Hello, Robert," she said in Samantha's voice. "I've been waiting for you." Then she stepped sideways off the trail and vanished into a stand of trees that definitely hadn't been there a moment before. I stumbled after her, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The trees closed around me, branches catching my pack, my sleeves, my face. When I burst through into a clearing, I was back on the trail. The same section of trail. Mile marker 7.2 was right in front of me, exactly where it should be, but something was wrong with it. The numbers looked newer, cleaner, like they'd just been carved. I checked my GPS. Mile 7.2. Exactly where I should be. But I'd just been here. I'd seen the not Samantha, followed her into the trees, and somehow ended up in the same spot. I looked back down the trail. It stretched away into the forest, disappearing around a bend. The same trail I'd just walked up. Except it wasn't. The trees were different. The rocks were different. The very quality of light filtering through the canopy felt different, like I was looking at the world through tinted glass. I tried the radio again. This time, instead of static, I heard a voice, clear as day. "Unit 23. This is Unit 17. Unit 17. That was Jake Morrison's call sign. Jake Morrison, who'd worked this forest for 22 years before he died in a climbing accident on the North Face 5 years ago. Jake Morrison, whose funeral I'd attended, whose widow still sent me Christmas cards. "Unit 23, respond." My mouth was desert dry. "Jake? Robert, you need to turn around. You need to go back now." "Jake? What? How are you?" "You're on my trail now, Robert. The trail that doesn't end. Turn around now or you'll never leave." I looked back down the trail. It seemed to stretch forever, disappearing into green shadows that looked deeper than they should be. "I can't leave without Samantha." A pause. When Jake's voice came back, it sounded infinitely sad. "Samantha's been gone for 3 days, Robert. You've been walking in circles for 3 days. 3 days. Impossible. I'd started the hike this morning. It was... What time was it?" I checked my watch. The digital display was flashing random numbers. 88, 88, Euro, 1367. Impossible times. My phone was dead. Not just out of battery, dead. The screen was cracked spiderweb style, though I hadn't dropped it. 3 days, Jake's voice repeated through the radio static. "Sarah and Emma are worried sick. Search teams are looking for you. You missed Emma's soccer game." Emma's soccer game. Saturday afternoon. I'd promised her I'd be there. I never missed her games. "What day is it?" I whispered. "Sunday night, Robert. You've been walking the same stretch of trail for 3 days. Same mile over and over. That's what happens on my trail. That's what happened to me. The pieces started falling into place. Jake Morrison found dead after being missing for 6 days. They'd found his body exactly where he'd started his final hike. The coroner said he'd died of dehydration and exposure, but everyone wondered how an experienced ranger could get lost on a trail he knew like his own backyard. Because he hadn't gotten lost. He'd gotten trapped. Why? I asked. Because I died angry, Robert. Died feeling like I'd failed too many people. All those hikers I couldn't save over the years, all those families I had to disappoint. The anger and guilt, it changed me, twisted me, made me into something else, something that feeds on other people's failures. I thought of the Hartley boy, the families I'd disappointed, the promises I'd made and broken. The only way out, Jake continued, is to stop walking. Stop trying to save everyone. Accept that sometimes people can't be saved. But Samantha is already dead, Robert. Has been for 3 days. Found her body yesterday at the bottom of Miller Creek Ravine. She fell. Accident. Nothing you could have done. The not Samantha I'd seen. That perfect, terrible smile. Then what was I following? Me. My hunger. I make you see what you need to see to keep walking, keep failing, keep feeding my trail with your guilt and desperation. The trail stretched ahead of me, exactly as it had for how long? Hours? Days. The trees looked exactly the same. The light hadn't changed. Even the position of that fallen log across the path was identical. I was in a loop, a supernatural hamster wheel powered by my own need to save people I couldn't save. How do I get out? Stop walking, sit down, accept the failure, let go of the guilt. Everything in me rebelled against that. I was a ranger. I didn't give up. I didn't abandon search and rescue operations, but I was so tired. When had I last eaten? Last drunk water? My throat felt like sandpaper, my legs like concrete. 3 days of walking the same trail, carrying the same pack, breathing the same recycled guilt. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Robert's situation? Comment below. I sat down heavily on the fallen log. The forest around me shuddered like I was looking at it through heat waves. Good, Jake's voice said. Now let go of Tommy Hartley. I can't. He was 12 years old, Robert. He fell into that ravine because he was scared and panicked and made a mistake. Not because you failed him. You found his body 6 hours after he was reported missing. Olympic record time for that terrain. But if I'd been faster, he still would have been dead. You know that. Deep down, you know that. I did know that. The coroner had been clear. Tommy had died on impact. Even if I'd had a helicopter and gotten there in 5 minutes, it wouldn't have changed anything. Now let go of Samantha. She was right there in front of me. I saw her disappear. You saw what I wanted you to see. To get you onto my trail. Samantha fell into Miller Creek 3 days ago, 20 miles from here. Different trail entirely. You were never tracking her. You were tracking yourself. The forest shuddered again. The trees were becoming translucent, like they were made of green glass. I don't want to let go, I whispered. I know. Neither did I. That's why I'm still here, still hungry, still making the same trail over and over, feeding on rangers like us who can't accept that we're only human. I thought of Sarah, probably sick with worry. Emma, wondering why Daddy missed her soccer game. The search team's looking for me, maybe walking into the same trap. Okay, I said. I let go. I closed my eyes and felt the weight of 3 years of guilt lift off my shoulders like shedding a heavy pack. Tommy Hartley was dead, but not because I'd failed him. Samantha Chen was dead, but not because I'd failed her. Sometimes people died in the wilderness despite every precaution, every rescue protocol, every ranger's best efforts. Sometimes death just happened. The forest around me cracked like an eggshell. I opened my eyes and I was sitting on the tailgate of my F-150 in the trailhead parking lot. My radio was squawking with chatter from multiple search teams. "Unit 23 to base," I said, my voice hoarse. "Robert!" It was my supervisor, Linda. "Jesus Christ, where have you been? We've had 20 people looking for you for 3 days." 3 days. Real time. "I got lost," I said, which wasn't exactly a lie. "Lost? On the Cascade Trail? Robert, you know that trail better than—" "I know, I'm sorry. I'm okay. Coming in now." I drove home to Sarah and Emma, who held me so tight I thought my ribs might crack. I told them I'd gotten turned around in bad weather, which they accepted because they trusted me to tell them the truth. 2 weeks later, the Forest Service found Jake Morrison's remains on the Cascade Trail. What was left of them anyway. They'd been scattered by animals, picked clean, but there was enough for DNA identification. His body was at mile marker 7.2. I attended his second funeral. This time, his widow didn't send Christmas cards. I still work as a ranger, still do search and rescue. But I've never gone back to the Cascade Trail, and I never walk alone anymore. Always bring a partner. Always. Because sometimes, the biggest danger in the wilderness isn't weather or terrain or wild animals. Sometimes it's yourself. Sometimes it's the guilt you carry and the ghosts who know how to use it against you. And sometimes, late at night when I'm lying in bed listening to Sarah breathe and the house creak, I can still hear Jake Morrison's voice on my radio, calling out to other rangers. "Unit 23, this is Unit 17. You need to turn around. You need to go back now." I hope they listen. I hope they're smarter than I was. I hope they know when to let go. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror. And comment your theory about what really happened to Samantha. I read every single one.